live in that minute. But the future is what awaits us out there. It is that which is in front of us. We can't predict what's going to happen in the next breath. We don't know what's going to happen in the next minute. We don't know what our next step, where it's going to take us, really. We have an idea, but we don't really know. The meaning of faith is, it's what we stand on in the present to push ourselves into the future. Because what's the next minute going to hold? The next 10 minutes? The next 20 minutes? We don't know. But we have a confidence about that because we have a foundation called faith that we stand on in the present so that we can push into the future. We have a title deed to the future, according to Hebrews. We are, with Jesus, co-owners of the future. You see, Hebrews tells us that Jesus is the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. He is the author and finisher of our course. And so, really, when we trust Him with our future. So we launch out together, and by trusting Him, we hold His hand and go to the future with confidence. That's our faith. That's what we do. Confidence is another one of those words, that God's prepared the way for us and we can count on Him. It says it is evidence. That's a court word. Evidence means that it is the exhibit that proves the case. When we were in Baylor, Don and I had been married for about 2-3 months, and we went to see one of my professors, Glenn Hilbert, who we both loved and was a real mentor to all of us. Jan, did you ever have Dr. Hilbert? He was a church historian, and so I was sort of a history buff, so we fit well together. But we were concerned about doing God's will for our lives. Where do we go to seminary? Where do we need to head? Is everything in order? Just sort of a checkup. And he was so good to us, and he reminded me that we don't know that we're in God's will until we look backwards. Before that, it is looking forward. And we really don't know if we're on the right track. And the amazing thing is that even when we look back and realize we were off course, God's back there picking us up, dusting us off, and getting us on the right course. But you don't know that till you look back. And that's the evidence of our faith, that God has been there and taken care of us. The other thing is, God's blessings are steadily in front of us. You know, in the Exodus experience, there were two forces of tension pulling on the children of Israel. You remember there was the one where God led by a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day, pulling them forward. And then there was them always looking back over their shoulder and saying, man, we wish we were back in Egypt. And they were just constantly in a tug. Do you need something?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to see it.
Oh. Live long and prosper. But it's just the two tensions pulling. But faith is that which pulls us forward. Because God has blessings for us, and He uses those blessings to bring us forward. Every once in a while you'll sit there and you'll think, well, all the pieces just fell into place, and you think, this God thing might have something to it. Because it really does. Because God is constantly there, blessing us, preparing the way, opening doors. It's an amazing life that we have in walking with Him, and it's steady. But life's out in front of us. Have you ever taken a 3-year-old shopping? What a wonderful experience that is. So now, if you're a grandfather, it's even better, because you just get them into all sorts of trouble, and then jump on their parents if their parents jump on them. But I sometimes think that our approach to life is more like a 3-year-old shopping than an adult stepping out in faith. Because we always go the wrong way, and we run and hide, and basically what ends up happening is you take the 3-year-old by hand and you try not to dislocate their shoulder, but you just drag them wherever you're going. I have an idea that some people feel like that's what God's doing, and the truth is, God's out there leading. He's not with us, jerking us around, and He's not pushing from behind. He is there leading us to truly find His blessings. And it's a test, the unseen things beyond which we can measure with our senses. You know, we live in several worlds. We live in a physical world, but we also live in a spiritual world, and the tool in which we live in the spiritual world is faith. So what does all this mean to me? Faith is the foundation, the ground. Have you been to see the Golden Gate Bridge or even the bridge over Lake Ray Hubbard over here? What amazes me when I see those things is the pilings on which those bridges are built. You know, they don't just float them. And those things go through all sorts of wear and tear and water and everything else. But they hold firm because the pilings are deep. They're built on a very strong foundation. And if they're not, they don't last very long. The truth is, that's what faith is for us. Those are the pilings on which we build our lives. And they are strong and reliable. And that's what faith does for us. I read a story several years ago of a missionary in India who was in the hospital, and outside his hospital window there was a ravine. And he began to watch, fascinated by a vine that was trying to cross the ravine. And it would send out runners and get a little farther every day, a little farther every day. And finally, one of the runners hit a dead tree on the other side. And so immediately the vine began to grow and grow and grow and grow until there was this big lush vine across this ravine that almost looked like a bridge. Until one day the wind got up, but it was attached to a dead tree. And it fell and disappeared. Faith is the live tree. It's God's out there, and we can trust Him. He is steadfast, and He holds on to us. It's a foundation on which we can trust our lives. We have a society that trusts in a lot of things. Most often, our society trusts in material things. It's what we can see. It's what we hold on to. We trust, oftentimes the conversation in the elevator in the morning is, where did the Dow go today? Up or down? What's the S&P doing? And that speaks to my retirement fund, so I do listen to that somewhat. But the material world is very real to us, and oftentimes that is what people trust in. Now, if you really truly invest yourself in believing in the material world, then basically what happens is you become a humanist, so that the most important thing to you is humankind. And there's really not much beyond that. Trust in the spirit of man raised to its highest quality. Now, if you take it to its lowest form in humankind, it's hedonism. So that the only value that matters is what's good for me. What makes me feel good, what fulfills my desires, what fulfills my passion. Eat good, smell good, do what you feel like, listen to what you want to, because that's all that matters, is what satisfies the senses. That's living in the material world. Now, most people live somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. They want to be comfortable, they want security, they want the good life. But the truth is, our security comes not through that which is material, but that which is spiritual through our faith. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust will destroy, but seek first the kingdom of God, and the rest of it's going to be added. So that's living in the faith world. It can happen in the life of the church even that we get so caught up in that which is material that we forget to major on that which is spiritual. See, the problem in building life that is here today and gone tomorrow is it's a roller coaster, and it does not last beyond this lifetime. Somebody said there's no U-Hauls on the hearse. That's very true. But the material world will cease around us, and the spiritual world will continue. I think probably I've mentioned somewhere along the way that I grew up in Happy, Texas.
Once or twice.
Once or twice. Several years ago, the church at Happy was hit by a tornado. the church that I'd gone to since 1963, hit by a tornado and blew it away. They began to rebuild it. Texas Baptist men came in and helped them rebuild it, and just about the time they got it about half finished, it burned.
Oh, no.
So they started back over. I was waiting for the plague of locusts next. I thought that was it. Not long after that, we had already moved to Levelland, but the church that we served in Panhandle burned. There was a short in a heating system, and it burned the thing to the ground. They managed to save the parsonage, which was a piece of junk, but they did. But the church burned. Then the high school that I went to burned, and they were able to save parts of it. The oldest parts were what was saved. The newer parts sort of got burned up. And then the house I grew up in burned on the inside. And I told Donna, my whole life is going up in smoke. But the truth is, either now or then, that's what's going to happen. And if what you're holding on to is buildings or things, you're going to be disappointed. But we are people of faith. And so our faith is not, what we live for is not that which is material, but it is that which is the foundation for us and where we live. I read a story several years ago. One of the Bible translators who was working with a tribe where there was no translation there was no biblical translation in their language for Scripture. And so he went and lived with those folks to try to get an idea of the language and what all was going on. And then he would record as much as he could. But in their language, he kept asking a word that meant faith, and they had no concept of what he was talking about. Until finally one day, he and one of his friends had been out walking for a long time, and the friend came in and sat down on a bench and said a word that he had not heard. And he said, "Tell me about that word." And the native said, "It means I can rest myself here and it will hold me up." And that's what faith is. That's how we live it. Well, one other quick word, and that is the writer of Hebrews said that the proof of all this is in creation. He said before there was anything, when there was nothing and only God, he called everything into order. It was only spiritual, but God created that. He didn't take somebody's mess and straighten it up. He made everything. I love the Latin phrase for that. It's one of the few I know. It's called creatio ex nihilo. Creation from nothing. And that's who God is. And that's where the spirit world is, and that's what faith is about, that we trust the one who created out of nothing all that we see and all that we know. The bottom line is that life is found, it's begun and lived when we put faith in God, when we build our foundation on Him, when we look to Him for the future, when we find His blessings waiting for us, and when we move ahead. That's where life is found. It's not found in seeking the material things of the world. It's found when we pursue God with a vengeance. At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus told a wonderful story that we know mainly through the song that our children, that we sang as children and our children sang. The wise man, the foolish man built his house upon the sand. And he did it 2 or 3 times. And then the floods came up, and the house on the sand went splat. That's a real word. You can use that one. But the wise man built his house upon a rock, upon the foundation, upon God, who is the rock of our salvation, on Jesus, who is our rock. Upon this rock, I will build my church. When we build in faith, we build life.